Very proud of Jalen Brunson. The brother put on a show, and I think that he's the greatest overachiever we've seen in the modern era. Nobody expected him to be this great, this productive, this kind of a finisher. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I'll say it again. I think Jalen Brunson saved the NBA.
Seven years ago, during Dirk Nowitzki's final season in Dallas, he started paying attention to a rookie almost nobody else was talking about. Not Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson, the 33rd pick in the draft. A 6'2" guard scouts thought was too small, not athletic enough, and probably destined to become nothing more than a reliable NBA backup. But Dirk kept noticing something the scouting reports couldn't measure. Something Brunson was doing when the cameras weren't watching. Dallas eventually let him walk. The NBA questioned whether New York had just overpaid for him, and even Dirk later admitted he wasn't sure Brunson could survive that spotlight. But 7 years later, Brunson had become an NBA champion and Finals MVP, and when you go back to what Dirk noticed in that rookie years earlier, this entire rise suddenly makes sense. Jalen Brunson's story makes more sense when you understand what NBA scouts thought he couldn't become. At Villanova, Brunson was already a winner. He helped lead the Wildcats to 2 national championships. He controlled games, he made smart decisions, he competed, and he had already developed many of the qualities teams spend years trying to teach young point guards. But there was a problem. He didn't look like the NBA's idea of a future superstar. Brunson stood around 6'2". He wasn't an overwhelming athlete. He didn't possess incredible length. He wasn't soaring above defenders or producing the kind of highlights that make scouts fall in love with potential. So despite everything he accomplished in college, 32 players were selected before him in the 2018 NBA draft. Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, DeAndre Ayton. Those were players teams imagined becoming franchise cornerstones. Brunson, Dallas selected him 33rd, a second-round pick, someone who could hopefully become a reliable backup, and ordinarily, that might have been the beginning of a quiet NBA career. Except Brunson entered Dallas at exactly the right moment, because while one legend was beginning his career, another was ending his. Dirk Nowitzki was playing his final NBA season. And while everyone else saw Brunson's limitations, Dirk started noticing something completely different. He saw how Brunson prepared, how seriously he treated practice, how much work he put in away from the spotlight. Those things don't appear on a draft combine measurement. But Dirk understood how valuable they were, because they were the same qualities that helped him survive more than 2 decades in the NBA. That was the first clue. The league was evaluating Brunson based on what he didn't have. Dirk was paying attention to what he did. And real quick, if you're enjoying stories like this that go beyond the numbers and explain how NBA careers really change, subscribe to Scary Zone NBA. Because Brunson being overlooked in the draft was only the beginning. Dallas would eventually get an even clearer look at what they had, and still let him leave. For most of Brunson's first 4 seasons, becoming the face of an NBA franchise wasn't even part of the conversation. Dallas belonged to Luka Doncic. Brunson became the reliable guard beside him. Steady, efficient, dependable. Then came the 2022 playoffs. Luka suffered a calf injury entering Dallas's first-round series against Utah. Suddenly, Brunson didn't have a superstar standing beside him. The Mavericks needed him to create offense. They needed him to lead, and Brunson responded with 41 points in Game 2. For the first time, NBA fans weren't watching Jalen Brunson the supporting piece. They were watching Jalen Brunson control a playoff game. Dallas eventually reached the Western Conference Finals, and Brunson's postseason had changed the conversation around him. But apparently, not enough. That summer, Brunson left Dallas and signed with the New York Knicks for 4 years and $104 million. And immediately, people questioned it. Could a 6'2" guard who had spent most of his career beside Luka really become the best player on a serious team? Could he handle New York? Could he justify that contract? The Mavericks had decided they could survive without him. A large part of the basketball world wasn't convinced New York had found a star. And this is where Brunson's career becomes fascinating. Because New York didn't suddenly teach him how to become Jalen Brunson. They simply gave him something Dallas never fully could: his own team. Brunson arrived in New York and almost immediately made the contract criticism look ridiculous. His scoring jumped. His responsibility increased. The Knicks started winning. But more importantly, Brunson showed that his game didn't require elite athleticism to control defenses. He played with angles, footwork, deceleration, shot fakes, body positioning, patience. Instead of jumping over defenders, Brunson learned how to move them. Instead of beating everyone with speed, he manipulated timing. And when defenses sent extra help, he became increasingly comfortable making the correct pass rather than forcing the shot. Everything scouts thought would limit him became less important than everything Brunson had spent years mastering. Then came the accolades: all-star appearances, all-NBA selections, deep playoff runs. Eventually, the Knicks reached the Eastern Conference Finals. The player once viewed as Luka's supporting guard had become the centerpiece of one of basketball's biggest franchises. But there was still one question left: winning. Because NBA history is brutal about this. Great numbers earn respect. Playoff performances build reputations. Championships change legacies. And in 2026, Brunson finally got his opportunity. By the 2026 postseason, nobody could realistically call Jalen Brunson an accidental star anymore. But what happened next pushed his career somewhere completely different. New York tore through the playoffs. Brunson delivered in pressure situations again and again. The Knicks reached the NBA Finals. Waiting for them was San Antonio, Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper. Size, length, athleticism. Basically everything Brunson had supposedly lacked his entire career. And yet the series became another reminder that basketball isn't played on scouting reports. Brunson scored 30 points in Game 1. New York won. The Knicks escaped Game 2 by 1 point. Then San Antonio answered in Game 3. And suddenly Game 4 became enormous. New York fell behind by 27 points at Madison Square Garden, 27, in the NBA Finals, against a team built around one of the most physically overwhelming players basketball has ever seen. That should have been the night the series changed. Instead, it became the defining comeback of New York's season. Brunson finished with 36 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. New York won 107-106, the largest comeback in NBA Finals history. And suddenly the Knicks weren't merely dreaming about a championship. They were one victory away.
And lead it 3-1.
Jalen Brunson and...
This is where the original Brunson story could have ended. The overlooked guard had become a superstar. He had taken New York to the finals. He had already proven everyone wrong. But Brunson had one more performance left. Game 5, San Antonio. One victory separating the Knicks from something New York hadn't experienced since 1973. And once again, the Knicks fell behind. San Antonio built a 16-point lead. But if there was one thing this Knicks team had demonstrated throughout the finals, it was that falling behind didn't mean they were finished. And Brunson took over. He scored 45 points. 13 straight Knicks points came from Brunson during a crucial stretch of the fourth quarter. New York completed another comeback, 94-90, series over. Knicks win 4-1. For the first time in 53 years, New York was NBA champion, and the player holding the Finals MVP trophy wasn't a former lottery pick. It wasn't the prototype scouts spend years searching for. It was pick number 33 from the 2018 NBA draft. Jalen Brunson. He averaged 32.6 points per game in the finals. And suddenly that old conversation about whether New York had overpaid him felt almost impossible to believe. But there was something even more interesting about the moment. Because years before the trophies, before Madison Square Garden belonged to Brunson, before anybody considered him capable of leading a championship team, Dirk Nowitzki had already noticed the foundation. Not because Dirk somehow predicted every point Brunson would score, but because he recognized the habits behind sustainable greatness. The preparation, the professionalism, the competitiveness, the willingness to work when nobody was watching. The league spent years asking whether Brunson was big enough, athletic enough, explosive enough. Dirk noticed something much simpler. Was he committed enough? And that answer turned out to matter more. Jalen Brunson's story isn't really about proving that scouting doesn't matter. It does. Size matters. Athleticism matters. Talent obviously matters. But basketball has never been completely measurable. Sometimes the difference between a good player and a franchise player exists in the things you don't see during a combine. Preparation, decision-making, leadership, confidence, and an almost unreasonable willingness to keep improving. Brunson had those qualities when he was a second-round pick, sitting in the same locker room as Dirk Nowitzki. He had them when Dallas still viewed Luka as the centerpiece. He had them when people questioned the $104 million contract. And he had them when New York was staring at a 53-year championship drought. The difference is that now, everybody can see them. Jalen Brunson is an NBA champion, a Finals MVP, and the face of the New York Knicks. The league eventually figured him out. Dirk just noticed first. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Scary Zone NBA for more NBA documentaries that go beyond the headlines. And tell me in the comments, where does Jalen Brunson rank among the best point guards in basketball right now?